Now we've got it. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. You know, this is one of those days when I wish that I could have introductory music and titles and everything like that, because I think you're going to find that today's live stream is going to be really special and really informative. At least I hope so. That's what I hope. That's my sincere hope. So today we're going to start what may end up being a series. It kind of depends on how far along we get. Where we're going to talk about alignment in D&D. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, alignment has kind of been, done to death. But has it really? Do people really understand the history of alignment and the impact on the game and how it's evolved and how it's shaped? I don't know. But we're gonna talk about that today and just discuss its impact on D&D, its evolution, and there's just a couple of things though that I want to mention going ahead with this. Two things that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to do real world alignment equivalents. I'm not going to get caught in the trap of saying, oh, I think this politician or this media personality or this historical individual would have been this alignment or that alignment or whatever. And the reason is alignments are game rules. Yes, they're game rules governing the personalities of personages in Dungeons and Dragons and their general psychological outlook of them. But I don't believe for a moment that you can easily categorize multidimensional, multifaceted, real-world people, hello, Chris, into alignment categories. I mean, broadly, you can say that these people obey the law and these people don't. And that maybe sometimes these people who obey the law don't obey the law, and sometimes these people who don't obey the law do obey a law. That's the problem. At best, the world over is chaotic neutral. We just kind of seem to do things at random, things that don't make a damn lick of sense. The closest real world analog I think you can get to alignments, and I don't remember who said this, was that governments are lawful good, people are chaotic neutral. And that's it. That's the end of discussion about alignments in the real world. You can do the meme chart that has lawful good Batman, chaotic good Batman, neutral good Batman, lawful neutral Batman, true neutral Batman, chaotic neutral Batman, and then lawful neutral and chaotic evil Batman. You can do that if you want, or insert thing here. But humans, living, breathing humans as a whole, are a lot more nuanced than a spectrum of game rules. Asking me what alignment I think, I don't know, Elon Musk is like asking me whether I think Elon Musk is the top hat, the race car, the dog, or the wheelbarrow in Monopoly. It's like asking me if I think Elon Musk is the is a chute or a ladder, or a snake or a ladder if you're anywhere else in the world. It doesn't matter what you say about alignment and real world people, because you're talking about a set of game rules and you're talking about a real person. So that's all I'm going to say about that. That's going to be the sole and total disposition as far as I'm concerned, about alignments in the real world. So, what is alignment? When I first got B2, which I discussed back on Monday, I believe it was. Monday, I talked about how B2 was the only D&D that I had for like a year and a half, maybe more. I don't recall exactly now, and how I played D&D with it. Well, in B2, there is a spell called No Alignment, and my 11-year-old self, alignment was how the front end of a car went, because I always heard my pop complaining about the alignment being off and it tearing up the tires on the beaters we had when I was growing up, and how straight a piece of construction was. So I didn't know alignment. Sure, people in the real world don't have alignments, but would intelligent magic swords in the real world have alignments? Yes, they would. But of course, once I got my Moldvay basic D&D rules and then a copy of the monster manual, my understanding of alignment was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Law, chaos, good, evil, neutrality, and everything in between. And I almost immediately understood it fundamentally. The only fantasy that I had read when I was 11 was Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. I hadn't delved into the influences that created alignment in chainmail. That's right, I said in chainmail, not in Dungeons and Dragons, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I'll show you here briefly the biggest influence on alignment. And you might be tempted to say, oh yes, the Elric books, because law and chaos and neutrality. But it was actually this book, Three Hearts and Three Lions by Poul Anderson, more than the Elric sagas by Moorcock, that impacted the creation of the alignment system. To wit, I'll read this here. Let's see. "'Tis a strange talk, though in truth, why this makes me think you may be of the chaos forces yourselves." "What do you mean?" asked Holger respectfully. "I'm ignorant of your affairs here. Could you explain?" He let the dwarf growl a long time without learning much. Huey wasn't very bright, and a backwoodsman as well. Holger got the idea that a perpetual struggle went on between primeval forces of law and chaos. No, not forces exactly. Modes of existence? A territorial reflection of the spiritual conflict between heaven and hell? In any case, humans were the chief agents on earth of law, though most of them were only so unconsciously, and some, witches and warlocks and evildoers, had sold out to chaos. A few non-human beings also stood for law. Ranged against them were almost the whole of the middle world, which seemed to include the realms of Fairy, Trollheim, and the Giants, an actual creation of chaos. Wars among men, such as the long-drawn struggle between the Saracens and the Holy Empire, aided chaos. Under law, all men would live in peace and order, and that liberty which only law can give meaning. But this was so alien to the Middle Worlders that they were forever working to prevent it and extend their own shadowy domain. To skip ahead. "In olden times," said Huey, "richt after the fall, nigh everything was chaos, ye see. But step by step, 'tis been driven back. The longest step was when the Savior lived on earth, for then naught of chaos or darkness could stand, and great Pan himself died. But now 'tis said chaos has rallied and make ready to strike back." I didn't know. And yes, Chris, Gary mined Three Hearts and Three Lions for far more than just alignments. But there you have it, the essential binary of alignments, law versus chaos. There's a little bit of neutrality explored in here, but I selected that passage specifically to highlight how codified alignments were from the inception of D&D, courtesy of this book. There's no gray area. There's no sense of, well, sure, the words law and chaos appear in here. No. Huey lays it out and explains it to Holger right then, right there, what law is and what chaos is, and how they impact the real world. Now, truly, the Elric sagas explored this also, don't misunderstand me, in just as codified a fashion. And indeed, Moorcock includes neutrality in a larger sense in the Elric sagas. I should say the sagas of the Champion Eternal, because we also have to consider John Dacre, Eric Osei, Hawkmoon, Corum. All those are an eternal struggle between law and chaos and the balance of neutrality. But I read the Elric sagas first and then Chronicles of Corum, and I was like, oh, these are all part of a thing. Now, Moorcock has gone back because he wrote several independent pieces of fantasy, independent from the Champion Eternal sagas. And he later went back and issued retcon volumes and brought them all together, which I don't necessarily agree with, but whatever. So there we have the foundations of alignment. But whither thence? Now, I mentioned this yesterday, and this may have come as a surprise to some of you who had never seen Chainmail, how much of a role-playing game the fantasy supplement of Chainmail is. Chainmail being this book, written by Gary Gygax and Jeff Perrin. And believe it or not, what is ostensibly a war game, a miniatures war game to be played on a sand table with elastilin figures or tin soldiers or what have you, actually includes an alignment system. This is where alignment comes from. This is the first inception of alignment. I mean, imagine Avalon Hill at the same time putting out a war game that had alignment in it, that had roleplay elements in it even. You're playing Advanced Squad Leader, and they give you a moral compass for your Japanese sergeant. But here, to reiterate what I said yesterday, on page 39 of Chainmail, general lineup. It is impossible to draw a line between good and evil fantastic figures. 3 categories are listed below as a general guide for the wargamer designing orders of battle involving fantastic creatures. We have law, neutrality, and chaos. The trinary of alignments is established not in original Dungeons & Dragons, but here in Chainmail first, which makes Chainmail, in my humble opinion, a role-playing game. And then under the category of law, we have halflings, dwarves, gnomes, heroes, superheroes, wizards with an asterisk, because it also indicates the figure appears in 2 lists, treants, and magic weapons. Now, Chris asked about magic weapons, but magic weapons are lawful in Chainmail. Under neutrality, we have sprites, pixies, elves, which are underlined, and then the footnote, underlined neutral figures have a slight predisposition for law. Neutral figures can be diced for to determine on which side they will fight, with ties meaning they remain neutral. Fairies, lycanthropes, asterisk, giants, asterisk, rocks, the giant birds that can, are big enough to pick up elephants. Elementals, in parens, and chimera. I think the parens indicates that there's multiple types of elementals. And then under chaos, we have goblins, orcs, kobolds, anti-heroes, wizards again, wraiths, wights, lycanthropes again, ogres, true trolls, giants, dragons, and basilisks. And I find it interesting that chimera are neutral in chainmail. The dragon, goat, and lion-headed flying beast, with or without a scorpion tail, depending on your point of view. But there we have it. The alignment system first introduced in chainmail, not in original Dungeons and Dragons. So if you were an avid player of chainmail and you liked that fantasy supplement a lot, or maybe you just used parts of that fantasy supplement to beef up, to infuse some interest in your historical games, and you decided that Christian forces would be neutral, Saracens would be lawful, Picts would be chaos, Romans would be lawful. However you laid it out, there was an alignment system. And I do wonder how many people scribbled in historical forces under those charts. So chainmail, laying down the essential trinary of alignments. Now, when Dungeons and Dragons was released, of course, it was a huge splash in the wargaming world. And it did not miss a trick. It brought over the alignment system from chainmail and expanded it a bit. So this is my Men in Magic booklet from one of my OD&D sets. And here, it doesn't really explain a lot. It doesn't really flesh out and detail alignment that much more. But it says, character alignment, including various monsters and creatures. Before the game begins, it is not only necessary to select a role, but it is also necessary to determine what stance the character will take: law, neutrality, or chaos. So if you've already got chainmail, if you're already using chainmail over there, maybe you've already determined and sort of sussed out what alignment is and what it means to you. But here it just says what stance they'll take: law, neutrality, or chaos. Character types are limited as follows by this alignment. And here are the lists for law that are also annotated with asterisks: men, halflings, patriarchs, treants, unicorns, pegasi, hippogriffs, elves, lycanthropes, which is both asterisk and underline, rocks again, dwarves, gnomes, and centaurs. An asterisk indicates that the name appears in both the law and neutrality column, and underline indicates that the name appears in both the neutrality and chaos columns. So you had creatures that could appear across multiple spectra of alignments. And then under neutrality, again, men, nixies, pixies, dryads, griffins, animals, elves, rocks, dwarves / gnomes, lycanthropes, orcs, ogres, dragons, wyverns, centaurs, hydrae, purple worms, sea monsters, chimerae, minotaurs, or giants. There's chimera again in neutral. And note also that now, unlike chainmail, orcs are now moved to neutrality, as are ogres, not necessarily creatures of chaos. Now, if you're going to go back and start playing original D&D someday, consider that. And then under chaos, we have men, evil high priests, goblins and kobolds, hobgoblins and gnolls, giants, orcs, and ogres, trolls, wights, lycanthropes, ghouls, wraiths, mummies, specters, vampires, medusae, manticores, gargoyles, gorgons, minotaurs, dragons, and chimera. So there's quite the extensive list of creatures and their alignments in original D&D. Now, as D&D rolled on, as it evolved, more monsters were introduced, and more monsters had to be categorized under different alignment headings. But two interesting evolutionary steps were taken during original Dungeons and Dragons run. The first came with Supplement 3, Eldritch Wizardry. And I hope I remembered to mark my page. And of course I did not. There it is. Character alignment. Now, there are monsters and character types that it lists with alignments, but now there are lots of conditions and footnotes for this. Dig this. Character alignment, including various monsters and creatures. Addition. Law, Quadrant, with an asterisk. Chiron, with 3 asterisks. Shedu, 3 asterisks. Mind Flayers, 4 asterisks. Mind Flayers under law. Well, wait, we only have 3 aligns. Mind Flayers are lawful? Does the law generally conform to good? We'll get to that in a second. Neutrality, brain moles, cerebral parasites, and thought eaters. Doesn't that just make your scalp itch just to think about? Chaos, demons, intellect devourers, and Sioux monsters. Lots of psionic stuff flying around in this book. But here we are. I think, so Quad will get an asterisk, and then underneath in the footnotes, neutral tendencies. Law, but neutral tendencies. Chirin, 3 asterisks. Under law, highly good. Shedu, the same. Mind Flayers, listed as law, highly evil but otherwise lawful. Highly evil. Now we're starting to color alignments with senses of good and evil. And then there's no footnotes under the neutral beings in the neutral column, the brain moles, the cerebral parasites, the thought eaters. Chaos, demons, intellect devourers, and Sioux monsters all have 2 asterisks, and the footnote indicates highly evil. So it is here, right here in Supplement 3, that we start to see a tendency to codify the notion of good and evil into the alignment forms of law, neutrality, and chaos. Although you'll note there is no lawful neutral, no... Well, coatl are listed as lawful, but with neutral tendencies. But the broader sense, chaotic, neutral good, etc., not really explored that much. So Eldritch Wizardry is out. Now, here's something interesting. This is, let's see. So this released in 1976. Earlier in that year, in February of 1976, I'm not exactly sure when in 1976 Eldritch Wizardry came out, by the way. So we're just going to say both of these things came out pretty much coterminously. Gary wrote in the Strategic Review, and this is just printed out from a PDF, and you can find this, by the way, if you go looking online. I won't say where, I won't say how, but if you go looking for copies of the Strategic Review, you can find nice crispy PDFs. I printed this from my legitimately purchased copy of the Dragon Magazine archive. Just FYI. Gary wrote a rather lengthy article, and I'll show these charts. I should have had my second camera set up. I apologize for that. Where he illustrates a quadrant system of alignments. So if you're familiar with the alignment wheel or the planar wheel, this is the root of it here. So this from February 1976, Strategic Review, Volume 2, Issue 1, The Meaning of Law and Chaos in Dungeons and Dragons and Their Relationship to Good and Evil. Many questions continue to arise regarding what constitutes a lawful act, what sort of behavior is chaotic, what constitutes an evil deed, and how certain behavior is good. There's considerable confusion in that most dungeon masters construe the terms chaotic and evil to mean the same thing, just as they define lawful and good to mean the same. This is scarcely surprising considering the wording of the 3 original volumes of Dungeons and Dragons. When that was written, they meant just about the same thing in my mind. Notice I do not say that they were synonymous in my thinking at the time. The wording in the Greyhawk supplement added a bit more confusion, for by the time that booklet was written, some substantial differences had been determined. In fact, I had the opportunity to do D&D. If I had I the opportunity to do D&D over, I would have made the whole balance very much clearer by differentiating the 4 categories, and many chaotic creatures would be good, while many lawful creatures would be evil. So right there, Gary wanted to expand law and chaos and neutrality and good and evil. If he had it all to do again by February of 76, scarcely 2 years after the release of Dungeons and Dragons, he would have revised it. And so he gives us this chart, and I'm not sure how clear this is going to be, but I'm going to describe what you're seeing after I show it to you guys. So we have an alignment quadrant chart that looks largely blank. So in the upper left, and again, I said this resembles the planar wheel also, but in the upper left, we have, well, across the top, I'll say across the top outside, we have heaven, paradise, and Elysium. And on the law and good side of the quadrant, in the upper left corner, we have saints. In the good and chaos quadrant, in the upper right corner, we have godlings. Now, there is a shaded square in the middle that's just marked neutrality, and it overlaps all 4 squares very slightly in the center. You can see that. And then on the left on the outside, we have nirvana. And on the right on the outside, we have limbo. Now across the bottom, we have hell, Hades, and the abyss. In the lower left-hand corner, devils. In the lower right-hand corners, for evil and chaos, we have demons, and for law and evil, we have devils. And so that's illustration 1. So you can see how alignment is now beginning to expand. And truly, the Strategic Review was not per se canonical rules. I mean, if you brought this to a dungeon master who was just adhering to the 3 little brown books, he didn't want to use Greyhawk, nor Blackmoor, nor Eldritch Wizardry, nor Gods, Demigods, and Heroes, or even Chainmail, he might scoff at this and say, well, that's just what they put in their newsletter and it doesn't count. Or alternately, he might say, oh, this is a game changer because this is written by Gary Gygax himself. All up to the individual dungeon master at this point. Now let's see. Now consider the term law as opposed to chaos. While they are nothing if not opposites, they are neither good nor evil in their definitions. A highly regimented society is governed by strict law, i.e. a dictatorship, while societies which allow more individual freedom tend to be more chaotic. The following list of words describe the two terms point this out. I've listed the words describing the concepts in increasing order of magnitude, more or less so, for the comparison with the meanings of the two terms as far as D&D is concerned. So here we go. Gary puts some synonyms down for law and chaos. Hello, Rich Denver. Hail to you too, my friend. Law, reliability, prosperity, principled, righteous, regularity, regulation, methodical, uniform, predictable, prescribed rules, order. Chaos, unruly, confusion, turmoil, unrestrained, random, irregular, unmethodical, unpredictable, disordered, lawless, anarchy. Basically, then, law is the strict order and chaos is complete anarchy. But of course, they grade towards each other along the scale from left to right on the graph. Now consider the terms good and evil expressed in the same manner. Good, happiness, friendly, kind, honest, sincere, helpful, beneficial, pure. And then in the evil column, we have unfit, mischievous, unpleasant, dishonest, bad. Sorry. My arms aren't quite long enough there. Wicked and corrupt. Or injurious. That was the word. All right, injurious. Wicked and corrupt. The terms law and evil are by no means mutually exclusive. There is no reason that there cannot be prescribed and strictly enforced rules which are unpleasant, injurious, or even corrupt. Likewise, chaos and good do not form a dichotomy. Chaos can be harmless, friendly, honest, sincere, beneficial, or pure, for that matter. This all indicates that there are actually 5 rather than 3 alignments, namely lawful good, chaotic good, lawful evil, chaotic evil, and neutral. The lawful good classification is typified by the paladin, which was a thing he had been introduced in Supplement 1 Greyhawk. And the typical paladin came from 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. Chris made that point earlier. Paladins came from there, as did many, many other things. The chaotic good alignment is typified by elves, not the elves in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. The elves in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions are, I would say, in mean, they're more like drow or possibly quicklings than they are, say, I would think Tolkien's elves really aren't chaotic good either. Tolkien's elves are a lot more lawful good. I mean, Tolkien's elves have seen Eru Iluvatar, like personally, face to face. They've met God. So what elven sources he might have been drawing that from, I don't know. Possibly Elves from the Broken Sword, another Poul Anderson book that heavily influenced Dungeons and Dragons. But we can dwell on that some other time. Let's see. Lawful evil is typified by the vampire, even though he got bumped to chaotic evil later. And the demon is the epitome of chaotic evil. Elementals are neutral. The general reclassification of various characters is shown in Table 2. And this is sort of an overlay, if you will, for the first table. And it's quite the mess. I'm not sure if you guys can see that down there at the bottom. But this diagram repeats the table with its quadrants of law and good, chaos and good, law and evil, and chaos and evil, and a neutral square in the middle. And under lawful good. We have gold dragons, paladins, Lamassu, or Lamassau. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Tolkien elves are mostly lawful snooty. A lot of them are. That's one of those comments that I think probably Elrond would kind of take a little bit of umbrage with, but then laugh out loud. But then Elrond was a half-elf. Elrond was not a true elf. He was Elrond half-elven. Anyway, silver dragons, giants, hobbits, liches. Liches? Wait a minute. Gary's got liches as lawful good, per this chart. I mean, I knew that, but surprise. Ents, unicorns, and dwarves. Now, I just want a quick aside. I don't want to get bogged down in this, but I never played the Forgotten Realms, but a buddy of mine and I had a discussion, long car ride home from a gaming convention once upon a time, and the subject came up of, do you think such a thing as a good lich could exist? And so we started thinking about it, and we came to the conclusion that it might technically be possible for a good lich to exist. Basically, for somebody to go through the rituals without the sacrifice, just the magic and the potion study, to recreate themselves as a lich, but only to continue their living existences for some end that they could not otherwise achieve spiritually. And then, lo and behold, later bored Googling, has D&D ever had a good lich? That's a thing in the Forgotten Realms. There were a couple of good liches, but it's in OD&D right there. I don't know if that was a typo on Gary's part, but good liches, man. And then under law and evil, we have werewolves, mummies, liches again. Liches, please. Ogre magi, kobolds, wights, goblins, wraiths. And these, as these are described, they're not just listed in a column. They're located in the quadrant. So red dragons are all the way down in the lower right-hand corner of the evil and chaos quadrant. So you can assume they are more evil. But then we have giants kind of in the middle of lawful good. So they might not tend to be quite as righteous as a paladin or gold dragon or Lamassu, but they're still lawful and good. Chris says, liches is lawful good. Maybe that's a holdover from wizards being lawful in chainmail. But IIRC in the Monster Manual, liches are only neutral, albeit it has evil in parentheses. Yes, and we're going to talk about the Monster Manual in just a minute. You got 10 problems. I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a lich ain't one. And you're fortunate. Were-tigers are actually in the evil quadrant of chaos, but they're very close to the good line, the dividing line between good and evil. So if you look in the 1E Monster Manual, were-tigers are listed as chaotic good. So I guess they got a little upgrade. Gary just pushed them over just a little bit. Ifriti are chaotic evil. Orcs are chaotic evil. Ropers, ogres, chimerae. Chimera are now firmly in chaotic evil. They don't get a pass anymore. They are very chaotic and moderately evil. They're no longer any neutral or lawful chimera. And it just kind of goes on like that. Assassins, interestingly, literally straddle the line, as do white dragons, ogres, and beholders, between lawful evil and chaotic evil. So that probably indicates that they can be either. Now in our neutral box, we've got pixies, centaurs, giants, even though giants are listed in both the law and the good quadrant, elementals, druids, zombies, and thieves. Druids, zombies, and thieves is one of my favorite Cher songs, by the way. So So we begin to see the formation of a more tiered and a more stratified, well, that means the same thing, of a more stratified system of alignments. Things are now not longer so broad, and even Gary says why. That law does not mean good and chaos does not mean evil. And he goes on for a few paragraphs giving his reasoning behind doing this. I really highly, if you want to understand the history of alignment, seek out a PDF of Strategic Review 0201 and read up on this article. But at the end, he says, as a final note, most of humanity falls into the lawful category, and most of lawful humanity lies near the line between good and evil. With proper leadership, the majority will prove towards lawful good. Few humans are chaotic, and very few are chaotic and evil. And paladins get their own quadrant way off up in the corner, right there. I'm not sure if you can see that, but that is a blown up view of the quadrants, and paladins are right in the far upper left-hand corner. So here is essentially Gary explaining this out. And again, a lot of dungeon masters might have said, so what? So what? That's just an article you wrote. That's just like your opinion, man. Right? So let's continue on with D&D history a little bit. After original D&D had run its course, and Gary began to recodify Dungeons and Dragons and condense it from articles like that, from flimsy supplements, from articles in The Dragon and things he'd written for APAs and questions he'd answered at conventions that people had hastily scribbled down and taken as canon and so on and etc. He began to compile advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, working on Dungeons and Dragons, Gary first released... Now, I mean, can you imagine an RPG today taking 3 years for all of its core rules to come out? I don't mean Kickstarter failures. I mean the company saying, we're releasing this book, a year is going to pass, we're releasing the next book, and then the final book that you actually need to run the game won't be released for almost a year after that. God, that would infuriate people. But the Monster Manual came out. Now, the interesting thing about the Monster Manual is that, and Chris notes, there's a holdover from Wizards being lawful. In the Monster Manual, liches are only neutral, albeit it has evil in parentheses. There are 2 creatures that I can think of off the top of my head that have very, very, very strange alignments in the Monster Manual. Liches and Sioux monsters. Their alignments are listed as single category alignments, but in the case of liches, again, Chris points out, aren't you a clever boy, skipping ahead in the reading, that liches have neutral evil in parens next to it. So by the time AD&D began to roll out, the notion of bumping into a good lich, or a lich that was just like, meh, was not really a thing. That was not going to happen. Sioux monster alignment, and for years, I thought this was a typo before I really started doing a deep dive. Sioux monsters, their alignment simply says chaotic. There's no parens, there's no asterisk, it's not underlined, it's not explained. If you're not familiar with what a Sioux monster is, they're these kind of, I guess the closest thing you could call them is they're like a bonobo or sort of a small monkey, but they're psionic. So if you have a psionic character, these little howler monkey things might attack your party and start mind blasting you. So these Sioux monsters are just listed as chaotic. And I wondered for the longest time, did that mean that they fall on the chaotic spectrum? I was utterly baffled, and eventually I just deemed that they must be chaotic evil. Since, it listed their tendency to attack people with chaotic, or attack people at random and so on and etc. They looked bad. The illustration of this, like, this grimacing monkey with the angry slanty eyes. It must have meant chaotic evil, and there's just a typo there. That sort of thing happens. And then I got more into Dungeons and Dragons and began to explore the hows and whys, and I was like, okay. But the first monster manual only has the 7 alignments. Lawful good, lawful evil, chaotic good, 5 alignments, I guess. Lawful good and lawful evil, chaotic good and chaotic evil, and neutral. And it doesn't really explore chaotic neutral, lawful neutral, and so on and etc. The monster manual for AD&D, which ostensibly was for 9 alignments, only has monsters, with 2 exceptions, of that essential 5 of something pentenary of alignments. It follows the strategic review. Now, as Dungeons and Dragons evolved and OD&D was deprecated as a rule system, although you could still purchase copies from the Dungeon Hobby Shop, and I imagine there might have been a few stores around the country, a few small hobby stores that may have still had a copy or 2 knocking around. But the replacement for it was penned by J. Eric Holmes, and we've done a cracking unboxing of this before, so we won't remunerate that here. But we're going to talk a little bit because Gary, working with J. Eric Holmes, and this is the majority of his, J. Eric Holmes' editing work, but surely he had to work with Gary on things. But alignment is expanded a little bit from what we get in the monster manual. And now alignments grow even further in Holmes' Dungeons and Dragons, the introductory set. Oh, my dice are in the way. Smooth those out of the way. Now, you remember our alignment chart, our alignment square. Unfortunately, this is not going to show up real well, I think, on camera. But we now have the alignment wheel, if you look here, coming into shape. Now you can pick alignments. And let's read Dr. Holmes' explanation of alignments. Characters may be lawful, good or evil, neutral, or chaotic, good or evil. Lawful characters always act according to a highly regulated code of behavior, whether good or evil. Chaotic characters are quite unpredictable and cannot be depended on to do anything except the unexpected. They are often, but not always, evil. Neutral characters, such as all thieves, are motivated by self-interest and may steal from their companions or betray them if it is in their own best interest. Players may choose any alignment they want and need not reveal it to others. Note that the code of lawful good characters ensures that they would tell everyone they are lawful. There are some magical items that can only be used by one alignment of characters. If the Dungeon Master feels that a character has begun to behave in a manner inconsistent with his declared alignment, he may rule that he or she has changed alignment and penalize the character with a loss of experience points. An example of such behavior would be a good character who kills or tortures a prisoner. And we now have this alignment wheel beginning to grow. And so we read on. In the lawful good quadrant, it just lists monsters for the most part. And monster, understand, in Dungeons and Dragons, I don't know if this changed in 2E and so on, monster was basically a catch-all term for any living being that isn't you. That you don't immediately know what it is or how it's going to act. The beggar you see 10 yards up the road, shivering, clad in rags, holding a bowl out, leaning on his staff, he's a monster. He could be a completely normal, starved, bedraggled human. He is a monster. The great rampaging dragon that is so big it looms over the city walls and is standing behind it, blotting out the sun, is obviously a monster. But anyway, so in the lawful good quadrant, we have unicorns. Unicorns lawful good, not chaotic good here. And blink dogs. Under chaotic good, we have brass dragons and elves. Chaotic evil examples given are, once again, Chimera. We get it, Gary. You demoted him. And bugbears. And lawful evil, gargoyles, which are, again, chaotic evil in AD&D, and specters. And then we have a neutral stop sign looking dealie in the middle. So Holmes kind of, and I don't know if Gary drew that or if J. Eric Holmes drew that and Gary liked it and kept it, but Holmes kind of further refined the wheel a little bit with some more examples and sort of made it look a little prettier than just a little 4 quadrant, or 5. Quadrant implies 4, but 5 section square with a, just a square in the middle for neutrality. So this more or less follows this is what is presented in the article and early in the monster manual. So my pages fell. So in those volumes, in Chainmail, Original Dungeons and Dragons, Eldritch Wizardry, the Strategic Review article, the Monster Manual, and Holmes' introductory set, we have the evolution of alignment to a point. But this would change as D&D went on, as D&D continued to evolve. This would change, and it would also change back the other way. And next week, on Monday, we're going to both move forward with the evolution of alignment and take a step back. Because my voice is starting to give out, and we've been at this about an hour, and I want to save some stuff for Monday. But Monday, we're going to explore how alignment continued to evolve from these sources I've already shown you. And we're going to discuss each alignment and its explanation in these 2 books. Because alignment is defined, I'll give you a little teaser here. Alignment is defined not just in the Player's Handbook, but similarly in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And they are not contradictory, I should point out. You don't find yourself going, wait a minute. You said lawful good people will never stab a baby in the Player's Handbook, and in the Dungeon Master's Guide, you're saying, yeah, a lawful good guy will stab a baby if he has to. That he adheres to the same, but it's nice to see. I consider the description of alignments in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook as being hand in glove. When a new player approaches me and they don't fully grok alignment, I'll go to my PDFs and copy paste both the description in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook for the alignment that they're considering, because it is a very full and rich and really not redundant explanation. Also, time depending on Monday, we're going to look at basic Dungeons and Dragons, at least the Tom Mulvey edit of Basic Dungeons and Dragons, and explore its take on alignment, which you may find interesting. So I hope you guys are thrilled and enthralled by this, and are enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. I'm liking this quite a bit. So we can take an even deeper dive on Monday and go into more detail, more history. And then once we've had that deep dive, we can talk about problem players and how problem players use and abuse alignment. So thank you as always, everybody, for stopping by. I do appreciate it. We're currently still sitting at 662 subscribers on YouTube, I think. Let me see. Because you guys know what happens. Yep, 662 subscribers. It's been sitting there for a while. But you guys know what happens when we hit 1,000 subscribers. I am going to host a mini convention, a virtual con, where myself and Kyle Schuon will be running virtual games for a day. I'm going to run some original D&D, some AD&D. I'll run some Gamma World, some Twilight 2000 possibly. Kyle's going to run some Conflict, and what else, I don't know. But hit that like, hit that subscribe. Go tell your friends, say, hey, I want to go to this guy's virtual con. I don't care if you watch his videos. Go like and subscribe. And I would absolutely love it if we could get there and I could do that, at least by the end of summer. And we're very close. We're very close. 338 subscribers. We need 338 of you folks clicking like and subscribe and clicking the bell for notifications to see more live streams like this. Do you want to see more content? Do you want to see pre-recorded content? Do you want to see more reviews? Do you want to see more painting labs? Do you want me to go back to painting labs? You tell me. You let me know. And the best way to let me know is to subscribe, is to tell folks to subscribe. And when we get there together, we're all going to have fun because we're all going to get to do a mini-con together. Hosted right here from the Delver Dungeon Studios in beautiful downtown Longwood, Florida, where it is raining cats and dogs outside right now. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that thunder rumbling out there, but it sure sounds nice. We've needed this rain for a while, and I hope it does this from now until next Friday. So anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you, everyone. You make this worth doing. I really appreciate your engagement here. And I hope you're well. I hope everybody's doing really well. And keep doing well. You know? Be healthy. Be good to each other. I love you all. And I will see everyone next week. Peace to you all. And thank you.